The extraction had gone sideways in ways that would make Sergeant Marcus Webb's superiors back on Earth furious for months. The diplomatic convoy was supposed to be secure, protected by 3 layers of Valorian guards, and traveling through what intelligence had assured them was friendly territory. Intelligence, as usual, had been catastrophically wrong. The ambush had been brutally efficient. Plasma fire had torn through the convoy's shields like tissue paper, and the Kravar rebels had known exactly which vehicle carried their target. Queen Isara Thulnara of Valoria, traveling incognito to peace negotiations that now lay in smoking ruins along with her security detail. Marcus had been 3 clicks away when the distress signal went out, running a routine patrol that suddenly became very non-routine. By the time he'd reached the convoy, the Valorian guards were dead or dying, and the Kravar were dragging a struggling figure from the wreckage of the lead transport. He'd recognized her immediately, despite the dust and blood. Queen Isara was distinctive even in disaster. Her orange skin seemed to glow even in the smoke-filled air, and her blonde hair, usually styled in the elaborate braids of Valorian royalty, hung loose around her shoulders. She was fighting her captors with a ferocity that surprised him, her violet eyes blazing with rage rather than fear. Marcus didn't think. Thinking would have reminded him that he was one human soldier against a dozen Kravar fighters, that engaging would violate at least 7 different regulations about interference in local conflicts, and that saving a foreign queen was way above his pay grade. Instead, he'd keyed his comm to broadcast a false report of incoming Valorian reinforcements, set his rifle to full auto, and gone loud. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. The Kravar, believing they were about to be overwhelmed by a superior force, had scattered into the hills. Marcus had used the confusion to reach the queen, cut her restraints, and half-carry, half-drag her into the cover of a nearby ravine. "Can you run?" He'd asked in rough Valorian, grateful for the 3 months of language training the Earth Defense Force had forced on him. "Can you keep up?" she'd replied in perfect English, her voice steady despite the blood streaming from a cut above her eye. They'd run. For 6 hours, they'd moved through hostile territory, Marcus using every bit of survival training he'd ever received to keep them ahead of the Kravar search parties. The Queen had kept pace without complaint, never asking for rest, never slowing despite what had to be injuries from the crash. When they'd finally reached the human forward operating base at dawn, she'd been whisked away by Valorian officials who'd arrived in a fleet of gunships, their faces a mixture of relief and fury. Marcus had given his report to his commanding officer, been chewed out for the regulation violations, commended for the successful rescue, and promptly forgotten about the whole incident. Or so he'd thought. 3 weeks later, he was summoned to the battalion commander's office. Colonel Hayes looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. "Webb, sit down. We have a situation." "Sir?" Marcus remained standing, years of military discipline overriding curiosity. "I said sit, Sergeant. Trust me, you'll want to be sitting for this." Marcus sat. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing an official Valorian diplomatic document, the text flowing in both Valorian script and English translation. "12 hours ago, we received this from the Valorian embassy. It's from Queen Isara herself." "The queen I rescued?" Marcus asked, confused. Is she okay? I heard she recovered from her injuries. She's fine, Hayes interrupted. The problem isn't her health. The problem is what she's demanding as thanks for saving her life. Marcus blinked. Demanding. Hayes turned the display toward him. Among the Valorians, there's an ancient custom called the Kalvara, the life debt. When someone saves a royal's life, that royal is obligated to provide a commensurate gift. The gift must be equal in value to the life saved, and it cannot be refused without causing a massive diplomatic incident. Okay, Marcus said slowly. So she's sending a medal or something. That's nice, but I don't see the problem. The problem, Sergeant, is that she's a queen. The value of her life, according to Valorian custom, is measured by her station. And she's decided that the appropriate thank you is. Hayes paused, looking pained. She's decided that the appropriate thank you is you. Marcus stared. I'm sorry, what? She's claiming you as her personal guard. She's invoked some archaic clause in the treaty between Earth and Valoria that allows her to requisition essential personnel for royal security purposes. She's filed all the paperwork, gone through all the proper channels, and as of 6 hours ago, you've been officially reassigned to her service. She can't do that, Marcus said flatly. I'm a soldier in the Earth Defense Force. I don't work for the Valorian royal family. She can and she has, Hayes replied. The treaty is ironclad, Webb. It was signed 200 years ago when Earth was desperate for Valorian technology and military support. We agreed to a lot of things we probably shouldn't have. This is one of them. Can't I just refuse? Hayes laughed bitterly. You can, and then we'll have a diplomatic crisis that could end the Earth-Valoria alliance, cost us access to their trade routes, and potentially start a war we can't win. No pressure. Marcus felt his world tilting. How long? There has to be a time limit. The assignment is indefinite, Hayes said. You serve until she releases you from the life debt or until one of you dies. This is insane. This is interstellar diplomacy, Sergeant. Welcome to Why I Drink. 5 days later, Marcus found himself standing in the throne room of the Valorian royal palace on their homeworld of Valora Prime, wearing a dress uniform that felt like a straitjacket, and surrounded by alien nobles who watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. Queen Ysara sat on her throne at the far end of the hall, looking nothing like the desperate, bloodied woman he'd rescued from the Kravar. She wore robes of deep crimson that complemented her orange skin, and her blonde hair was arranged in intricate patterns that probably took hours to create. A crown of some silvery metal sat on her head, and her violet eyes regarded him with an intensity that made him want to fidget. Sergeant Marcus Webb of Earth, she said, her voice carrying easily through the massive chamber. You saved my life at great risk to your own. You asked for nothing in return. By the laws of my people, I am obligated to give you something of equal value. She paused. Unfortunately for both of us, there is very little that equals a queen's life. Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. I could offer you wealth, Ysara continued. Land, titles, estates on a dozen worlds. I could make you rich beyond your species' comprehension. But I suspect you would refuse such things, wouldn't you, Sergeant? Marcus kept his expression neutral. Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. Your job, she repeated, a hint of amusement in her voice. Your job was to patrol a quiet sector. Your job did not include assaulting a dozen Kravar fighters to rescue a foreign monarch. Your job did not include carrying me 6 hours through hostile territory while I bled on your uniform. Your job did not include risking a court-martial for violating non-interference protocols. She stood, descending from her throne with fluid grace. The nobles parted as she walked toward him, and Marcus forced himself to remain at attention as she circled him slowly, studying him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You want to know why I claimed you?" she asked softly, her voice pitched for his ears only. "My advisors think I'm being vindictive, punishing a human soldier by dragging him away from his military career. They think I'm flexing political muscle to remind Earth that Valoria holds power in this alliance." She stopped in front of him, looking up to meet his eyes. At this distance, he could see the faint scar above her eyebrow where she'd been injured during the ambush. "The truth is simpler," she continued. "During those 6 hours in the wilderness, you had dozens of opportunities to abandon me. You could have hidden me somewhere and gone for help. You could have surrendered to the Kravar and saved yourself. You could have left me when I slowed you down, when my injuries made me a liability." "I would never," "I know," she interrupted. "That's precisely the point. I watched you, Sergeant Webb. I watched you calculate angles and trajectories, watched you choose harder paths because they were safer for me, watched you give me your water when you thought I wasn't looking. And I realized something. I have 300 Royal Guards, all trained since birth to protect me. Do you know how many of them would have done what you did?" Marcus said nothing. "Perhaps half," Ysara said quietly. "Perhaps. Many would have protected me out of duty, but you protected me because you couldn't do otherwise. It wasn't duty or politics or calculation. It was simply who you are." She turned to address the court. "I claim Sergeant Marcus Webb under the Calvara not as a trophy or a political maneuver, but because I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who has already proven that my life matters to him more than regulations or personal safety. Someone who won't hesitate when hesitation could cost everything." She looked back at Marcus. "I'm not asking you to serve me as a decoration or a symbol. I'm asking you to do what you already did, keep me alive. Because there are people in this court, in this kingdom, who want me dead. The Kravar ambush wasn't random, Sergeant. Someone with access to my security protocols gave them my route, my vehicle, everything they needed." Marcus felt ice settle in his stomach. "You're saying there's a traitor in your court?" "I'm saying there are probably several," Ysara replied. "And I'm saying that I trust no one in this room except the human soldier who had no reason to save me but did it anyway." She raised her voice again. "Sergeant Webb, I offer you the position of Queen's Shield, personal guardian to the throne, answering only to me with authority to protect me by any means necessary. Do you accept?" Marcus looked around the throne room at the sea of alien faces, at the weight of politics and power pressing down on him. He thought about Earth, about his unit, about the life he'd planned that didn't include becoming bodyguard to an alien queen. Then he looked at Ysara, at the intelligence and determination in her violet eyes, at the scar she'd earned because someone had betrayed her. He remembered carrying her through the wilderness, remembered the way she'd kept pace despite her injuries, remembered her fierce refusal to give up. "I accept, Your Majesty," he said. The next months were a crash course in Valorian politics, palace intrigue, and why queens needed bulletproof shields between them and their own nobility. Marcus learned that Ysara had ascended to the throne at 23 after her parents died in what was officially called an accident, but what everyone knew was assassination. She'd spent 5 years consolidating power, making enemies among the conservative nobility who thought she was too young, too progressive, too willing to deal with aliens like humans. The assassination attempts came regularly. Poison in her food, sabotaged equipment, accidents that would have killed her if Marcus hadn't developed a paranoid attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. He tasted her meals, checked her quarters for explosives, stood between her and every potential threat with a stubbornness that made the other guards shake their heads. "You're going to give yourself a heart attack," Isara told him one evening after he'd personally inspected every gift brought to her birthday celebration. "Not everything is trying to kill me. Just most things," Marcus replied, moving a suspicious-looking sculpture away from her seat. "I'll relax when you're safely dead of old age in about 300 years, she laughed. "Humans only live about a century. You planning to serve from beyond the grave? If that's what it takes, Your Majesty." The formality had become a joke between them. In private, she was just Isara, and he was just Marcus, two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. She taught him about Valorian culture, about the complex web of alliances and betrayals that made up court politics. He taught her about Earth, about human history and the stubborn refusal to give up that seemed to define his species. "Is it true that humans once fought a war that lasted 100 years?" she asked one night, both of them reviewing security footage from the latest state dinner. "Several, actually," Marcus said. "We're persistent like that, probably why I'm still standing here checking camera angles instead of sleeping." "You should sleep," Isara said. "I have other guards who might be compromised," Marcus finished. "We've been over this. I sleep when you're secure, and you're never secure in this viper pit of a palace." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you hate me for this, for claiming you, for taking you from your life?" Marcus looked at her, at the exhaustion in her eyes from another day of smiling at people who wanted her dead. "No," he said honestly. "I hate that you need this. I hate that your own people are trying to kill you, but serving you. Keeping you alive, that doesn't feel like a debt or an obligation anymore. It feels like—" He paused, searching for words. "It feels like something worth doing." The real assassination attempt came 8 months into his service. They'd identified the primary conspirators, 3 high-ranking nobles who'd been funneling weapons to rebel groups and planning a coup. The arrests were scheduled for dawn, but someone had tipped them off. The explosion came at midnight, tearing through the palace's east wing. In the chaos, masked figures stormed Isara's private chambers. Marcus killed the first 3 before they cleared the doorway, his human reflexes and Earth military training giving him the split-second advantage he needed. The 4th attacker got past him, blade raised. Marcus threw himself between the attacker and Isara, felt the burning slash across his ribs, and put 2 rounds through the assassin's chest. When the palace guards finally arrived, they found Marcus standing over Isara's unconscious form. She'd been drugged with aerosol sedatives. Bleeding from half a dozen wounds, his rifle aimed at the doorway and his eyes promising death to anyone who came through it. "Stand down, Sergeant," Captain Thex ordered. "The palace is secure." "Prove it," Marcus growled. "Get Her Majesty to the secure medical facility, full hazmat protocols. No one touches her without my clearance." They carried Isara out on a stretcher, Marcus limping beside it despite the medics trying to treat his injuries. He didn't relax until she was safely behind 3 locked doors in the most secure wing of the palace. Didn't let anyone sedate him until she woke up and confirmed she was all right. When he finally collapsed, he slept for 18 hours straight. He woke to find Isara sitting beside his bed in the medical ward, her orange skin pale with worry, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "You almost died," she said quietly. "Didn't though," Marcus replied, his voice rough. "You're safe, that's what matters." "No," Isara said firmly. "You matter, your life matters as much as mine." "The life debt, the life debt is discharged," Isara interrupted. "You've saved me 3 times over, Marcus. You don't owe me anything anymore. I'm releasing you from service. You can go home to Earth, back to your military career, back to—" "No," Marcus said. Isara blinked. "What?" "I said no. I'm not leaving. Marcus, you don't have to stay. The debt is paid." "This isn't about the debt anymore," Marcus said, struggling to sit up despite the pain. "Maybe it never was. You asked me once if I hated you for claiming me, and I said no. What I didn't say was that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about obligation. You're not just a queen I'm sworn to protect. You're my friend, and I don't abandon my friends, especially when they're surrounded by people trying to kill them." Tears welled in Isara's violet eyes. "You're an idiot." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But I'm your idiot, so you're stuck with me whether you like it or not." She laughed through her tears. "The debt was supposed to be you thanking me by serving. How did this become me being grateful you're still here?" "No idea," Marcus said, "but I figure we'll work it out as we go. That's what friends do." Isara reached out and took his hand, her orange skin warm against his. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not for the service or the protection or any of that. Thank you for choosing to stay." "Thank you for giving me a reason to," Marcus replied. Later, after the conspirators were arrested and the palace was truly secure, after Marcus had recovered from his injuries and Isara had reformed her guard completely, they stood together on the palace balcony watching the twin moons rise over Valora Prime. "My advisors think I should find a way to replace you," Isara said. "They say humans don't live long enough to be reliable long-term guards." "What do you think?" Marcus asked. She smiled. "I think that a single human lifetime of loyalty is worth more than 300 years of service from someone who's just following orders. I think that some debts can't be repaid because they transform into something else entirely. And I think that the best decision I ever made was deciding that thank you wasn't optional." Marcus returned her smile. "You know, when you first claimed me, I thought you were crazy. And now I think you were right. Sometimes the best way to say thank you is to refuse to take no for an answer." They stood in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. A human soldier and an alien queen who'd found something neither expected in the fulfillment of an ancient debt. Friendship, trust, and the understanding that some bonds, once forged, could never truly be broken. The life debt had been paid a dozen times over. But Marcus wasn't leaving. Some debts, he'd learned, were worth keeping forever.